Pretend I am arresting you. The immigration agent whispered the words directly into my ear, his grip on my bicep tight enough to bruise. Stay silent and do not look at your family, or you will never see daylight again. I thought he was joking. I thought this was some kind of twisted airport security protocol. But then I felt the cold steel of handcuffs snap around my wrists and saw the look in his eyes. It was not the look of a man doing a routine check. It was the look of a man defusing a bomb. 30 minutes later, sitting in a windowless interrogation room, I watched the security footage from the arrival terminal. I saw my son. I saw the smile on his face as I was dragged away. And in that moment, the father in me died, and the soldier I used to be woke up. Before I tell you how I brought down my own flesh and blood, hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to cut a toxic person out of your life to survive. Let me know in the comments what you would do if you found out your family vacation was actually a one-way ticket to prison. My name is Clayton Reeves, and at 70 years old, I thought I was done fighting wars. I spent 20 years flying transport planes for the Air Force, hauling cargo into places that did not exist on public maps. I retired to Seattle to live out my days watching the rain and fixing old engines. But standing in the immigration line at SeaTac International Airport, I felt a fatigue that had nothing to do with jet lag. My knees were screaming from the 10-hour flight from Colombia. My right shoulder, where I took shrapnel in '91, was throbbing in the damp Pacific Northwest air. I just wanted to go home. I wanted to sit in my recliner and forget about the humid heat of South America. I shifted the weight of the gray, hard-shell suitcase from one hand to the other. It was brand new. My daughter-in-law Tiffany had insisted I take it. She threw out my old leather duffel bag the day before I left, claiming it smelled like a garage. She bought me this sleek modern thing with 4 wheels and a built-in lock. She said she wanted me to travel in style. I looked at it now with a strange sense of unease. It felt heavier than I remembered. I had only packed a few linen shirts and some souvenirs, but the bag felt dense, like it was pulling me down toward the floor. The line for customs was moving at a glacial pace. The air smelled of stale coffee and nervous sweat. I adjusted my collar, trying to look presentable. I was wearing my best navy blazer. A man of my generation does not travel in sweatpants. I wanted to look dignified when I saw my son Derek. He had paid for this whole trip. He said it was a 70th birthday present. He said I needed to relax. He said he and Tiffany would handle the business and the house while I was gone. I remember feeling so grateful. I remember thinking that maybe, just maybe, my boy had finally grown up and become the man I tried to raise. "Sir, step out of the line." The voice was low and authoritative. I looked up. A man in a dark suit was standing right next to me. He did not look like the regular TSA agents in their blue uniforms. He looked like trouble. He had a scar running through his eyebrow and eyes that scanned everything at once. This was Agent Russo, though I did not know his name yet. "I am just waiting for my turn, officer," I said, reaching for my passport in my breast pocket. "Do not reach for anything," he barked loud enough for the people around us to turn and stare. Before I could process what was happening, he grabbed my arm. He spun me around. He slammed me against the partition wall. It wasn't gentle. It was violent theater. My bad shoulder screamed in protest. "What is the meaning of this?" I shouted, my military instincts kicking in. "I am a United States citizen. I served this country." That was when he leaned in. That was when the world tilted on its axis. He pressed his face against the side of my head, his lips grazing my ear. "Pretend I am arresting you," he whispered. The volume of his voice dropped to a barely audible hiss. "If you want to live, you will stop fighting me right now. There are eyes on you. Pretend I am arresting you and walk." I froze. I knew the tone of command when I heard it. This wasn't a power trip. This was a rescue operation disguised as an assault. I went limp. I let him pull my arms behind my back. I felt the metal cuffs click shut. The sound was final. It was the sound of my freedom evaporating. "Move!" Russo shouted for the benefit of the crowd. He grabbed the handle of the gray suitcase with one hand and shoved me forward with the other. We began the long walk through the terminal. It was a walk of shame I never imagined I would take. People were pulling out their phones. I saw the flashes of cameras. I heard the whispers. Look at that old man. Probably a mule. Disgusting. I kept my head down, staring at the polished terrazzo floor. I tried to focus on my breathing. In, out, just like flying through turbulence. We bypassed the regular customs desks and headed toward the glass doors that led to the public arrival area. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. Derek would be there. Tiffany would be there. They would be terrified. They would be calling lawyers. They would be screaming at the officers to release their father. I needed to warn them. I needed to tell them there was a misunderstanding. As we approached the sliding glass doors, Russo tightened his grip on my arm. "Look at your left," he murmured. "Look at the greeting area. Do not stop walking. Just look." The doors slid open. The noise of the arrivals hall rushed in. Families were hugging. Chauffeurs were holding signs. And there, standing near the railing, were my son and his wife. I looked at them. I searched their faces for the panic I felt in my own chest. I searched for the love I had convinced myself was there. Tiffany was holding her phone up. She was live streaming. But she wasn't crying. She wasn't screaming for help. She was posing. She had one hand over her mouth in a gesture of shock, but her eyes were checking the screen, making sure the lighting was flattering. She was framing the shot to capture me in handcuffs in the background. She was turning my destruction into content. And then I saw Derek, my son, the boy I had taught to fish, the boy I had sat up with when he had fevers, the man I had entrusted with my power of attorney before I left for this trip. He wasn't looking at me with concern. He wasn't rushing toward the security line to demand answers. He was leaning against a pillar, looking down at his phone. He typed a quick message. Then he looked up. Our eyes locked through the crowd. He didn't flinch. He didn't gasp. He smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was a cold, calculated smirk. It was the smile of a man who had just won a bet. It was the smile of a predator watching a trap snap shut. He gave a nearly imperceptible nod to a man in a cheap suit standing next to him, a lawyer I had never seen before. The air left my lungs. The pain in my shoulder vanished, replaced by a dull, aching void in the center of my chest. He knew. He knew I was going to be arrested. He knew because he was the one who made it happen. Keep walking. Russo ordered, pushing me toward a side door marked, "Authorized personnel only." I stumbled forward, my legs numb. I looked back one last time. Derek was already turning away. He put his arm around Tiffany's waist. They didn't look like a grieving family. They looked like a couple who had just inherited a fortune. The door closed behind us, cutting off the view of my betrayal. The hallway was quiet, smelling of industrial cleaner and damp concrete. "You see it now, don't you?" Russo said, his voice losing the aggressive edge he had used in public. I didn't answer. I couldn't answer. My throat was closed tight. "We have a lot to talk about." "Mr. Reeves," Russo said, unlocking the handcuffs as soon as we were out of sight of the public. "That suitcase you are carrying is filled with enough cocaine to put you away for the rest of your life. And we know you didn't pack it." I looked at the gray suitcase. The gift. The Trojan horse. I leaned against the concrete wall and slid down until I hit the floor. I was a prisoner in my own country. But the prison wasn't built of bars and guards. It was built of lies, and the architect was my own son. I closed my eyes, and in the darkness I saw Derek smile again. "Okay," I whispered to the empty hallway. "Okay." If he wanted a war, he was going to get one. He forgot that before I was his father, I was a soldier. And I know how to survive behind enemy lines. The interrogation room was a box of concrete and stainless steel that smelled of industrial disinfectant and old fear. There were no windows. The only light came from a single strip of fluorescent bulbs overhead that buzzed like a dying insect, casting a harsh antiseptic glare on everything. I sat at the metal table, my hands cuffed to a steel ring bolted to the floor. The cold from the chair seeped through my trousers, settling into my bones, making my arthritis flare up with a dull, throbbing ache. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the confusion swirling in my mind. Agent Russo stood across from me. He had taken off his jacket. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms thick with muscle and scars. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't playing the bad cop who screams and slams his fist on the table. He was quiet. And his silence was terrifying. On the table between us sat the gray suitcase. It was open. My clothes were scattered in a pile pushed aside as if they were trash. In the center of the table, isolated like a piece of evidence in a murder trial, sat the fluffy alpaca teddy bear. I looked at that bear. It was soft white and innocent. I remembered the heat of the market in Bogota where I bought it. I remembered Tiffany FaceTime calling me insisting on that specific one. She said my grandson Leo loved alpacas. She said it had to be the big one with the blue ribbon. I had spent 2 hours haggling with the vendor in my broken Spanish just to get it. I carried it through the airport like a fragile treasure, careful not to crush it. It was a gift. It was love packed in synthetic fur. Russo picked up a box cutter from the table. He slid the blade out with a sharp click. He looked at me, his eyes devoid of malice but full of a grim knowing. "You claim this is a gift for your grandson," Russo said, his voice flat. "It is," I rasped. My throat was dry as sandpaper. "His name is Leo. He is 5. Please, Agent. That is just a toy." Russo didn't answer. He grabbed the bear by its head. He plunged the blade into the soft white belly of the toy. The sound of the fabric tearing was loud in the small room. It sounded like skin tearing. I flinched. It felt like he was cutting me. He reached inside the stuffing. His hand moved around, searching. Then he pulled. He didn't pull out cotton. He pulled out a thick, brick-sized package wrapped in layers of heavy plastic and duct tape. He dropped it on the table with a heavy thud. It wasn't light. It was dense. Then he reached in and pulled out another one. 2 bricks. He took the knife and sliced the tape on the first brick. He poked the blade in and lifted a small amount of white powder. It sparkled under the harsh lights. 2 kilograms, Russo said. High-grade cocaine. Street value is about $60,000. But the federal prison sentence for trafficking this amount across international borders is mandatory. 20 years to life. You will die in a cage, Mr. Reeves. I stared at the white powder. The room started to spin. The walls felt like they were closing in. "That is not mine," I whispered. "I don't know how that got there. I swear to you, I am a retired pilot. I have a pension. Why would I do this?" Russo sighed. He reached into a manila folder and pulled out a stack of photographs. He fanned them out on the table in front of me like a winning poker hand. I looked at the first photo. It was grainy, taken with a long-range lens, but the faces were clear. It was a rainy night at the Seattle docks. 2 men were standing under a street lamp. One was a man I didn't know, a rough-looking character with tattoos on his neck. The other man was wearing a familiar trench coat. It was Derek. My son. I looked closer. Derek was handing the tattooed man a thick envelope. I looked at the next photo. It was a document. A credit card statement. It showed the purchase of my plane ticket to Colombia. "See this card number?" Russo asked, tapping the paper. "It is a cloned card. A ghost card. It traces back to a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands, and the IP address used to book the ticket. It matches the Wi-Fi at your son's house." I shook my head, trying to deny what my eyes were seeing. "No. Derek bought that ticket as a birthday gift. He wanted me to relax." Russo leaned in close. His voice dropped, becoming almost gentle, which made the words hurt even more. He didn't want you to relax, Clayton. He wanted you gone. Russo pulled out a final piece of paper. It was a transcript of a phone call. We received an anonymous tip 2 hours ago, Russo said. The caller knew exactly what flight you were on. They knew exactly what suitcase you were carrying. They even described the teddy bear. They said they were a concerned citizen who overheard a drug deal. He tapped the paper. We traced the call. It came from a burner phone. But we pinged the location of the call when it was made. It was made from inside the VIP lounge at SeaTac Airport, the same lounge where your son was waiting for you. I felt a physical blow to my gut. The air left my lungs in a rush. Derek called you, and I gasped. My own son called the police on me. Why, Russo asked. He wasn't asking me. He was leading me to the answer. Why would a son frame his 70-year-old father for international drug trafficking? What does he gain if you go away for life? I stared at the white powder spilling out of the alpaca. I thought about the paperwork Tiffany had made me sign before I left. She said it was for travel insurance. She said it was just in case something happened to me abroad. I hadn't read it. I trusted them. The trust fund, I whispered. The realization tasted like ash in my mouth. The Reeves Family Trust. It was set up by my father. It holds the deeds to the land, the company assets, everything. It is worth nearly $50 million. I am the sole trustee until I die, or until you are incapacitated. Russo finished for me. Or until you are convicted of a felony. There is a morality clause in most of these old trusts. If the trustee becomes a felon, they are deemed unworthy, and the control passes immediately to the next of kin. My stomach lurched. The pieces fell into place with a sickening click. The sudden vacation, the new suitcase, the specific request for the bear, the rush to get me home. They didn't just want me out of the way. They wanted me erased. They wanted to bury me in a federal prison cell so they could crack open the piggy bank. Derek didn't send me on a holiday. He sent me on a suicide mission. I looked at the photo of Derek again. He was smiling in the picture just like he had smiled at the airport. He had hugged me before I left. He had told me he loved me. And all the while he was calculating exactly how many years I would get for the poison he had packed in his son's toy. A wave of nausea rolled over me, hot and violent. I couldn't stop it. I doubled over. I gagged. Russo grabbed a metal wastebasket and shoved it under my face just in time. I retched. I threw up until my stomach was empty, and then I dry heaved until my ribs ached. I wasn't vomiting from fear. I wasn't vomiting because of the jail time. I was vomiting because my soul was rejecting the reality. The blood in my veins, the blood I had given to that boy, felt toxic. I had raised a monster. I had protected him, funded him, bailed him out, and loved him. And in return, he had packed 2 kilos of death into a teddy bear and fed me to the wolves. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand. I was shaking. Tears were streaming down my face, mixing with the sweat. Russo handed me a paper towel. He didn't say anything. He just waited. I looked up at him. The man in the reflection of the one-way mirror looked like a ghost. He looked broken. But deep inside that broken old man, a spark ignited. It was small, but it was hot. It was the anger of a survivor. I spat into the bin. I took a deep breath of the sterile air. You said you knew I didn't pack it. I said, my voice raspy and weak. Russo nodded. We have been watching Derek for 6 months. He is into deep with the cartel. He owes them money he doesn't have. Delivering you was his payment. He sold his father to clear his debt. I closed my eyes. I saw Derek's face. I want a deal, I said. Russo pulled out a chair and sat down. He opened a new file. I thought you might say that, Clayton. Here is what we need you to do. I looked at the bear one last time. The innocent toy was gutted, its insides spilling out. It was a perfect metaphor for my family. Tell me, I said. Tell me how to burn him down. I looked at Agent Russo across the metal table, and I made a decision that felt like swallowing broken glass. I reached for the confession pad he had left sitting near the edge of the desk. My hand was trembling, not from age, but from the sheer weight of what I was about to do. I was going to take the fall. It was a reflex, an old habit etched into my DNA. For 35 years, I had been cleaning up Derek's messes. I paid for the window he broke in 3rd grade. I hired the lawyer when he got a DUI in college. I bailed out his first failed startup. This was just the biggest mess yet. I told myself that he must be in trouble. He must be scared. The cartel must have threatened him. I convinced myself that he was a victim, and I was the only shield he had left. Give me the pen, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I will sign it. I will say I packed the bag. I will say I did it for the money. Just leave my son out of it. Russo looked at me with an expression that was half pity and half frustration. He didn't give me the pen. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small digital recorder. He set it on the table between us. The black device looked innocent enough, but it was about to deliver the final bullet to my heart. You think you are saving him, Russo said, his voice hard. You think he is some scared kid who got in over his head. You think he loves you. Clayton, you need to listen to this. We tapped his phone 3 days ago. This is a conversation he had with his lawyer, the man you saw at the airport. Russo pressed the play button. The audio was crisp. I could hear the background noise of a busy restaurant. I heard the clink of silverware on china. I heard the sound of ice rattling in a glass. And then I heard the voice that I had listened to since the day he was born. Derek's voice was casual, relaxed. It was the voice of a man enjoying a steak dinner, not a man worried about his father. Don't worry about the old man, Derek said on the recording. The plan is bulletproof. The feds will find the candy in the bear and lock him up and throw away the key. Then I heard another voice, the lawyer. But what if he fights it? What if he gets a good attorney and gets out on bail? The legal fees will eat into the trust fund. Derek laughed. It was a dry, cruel sound. He won't fight it. He is weak. He will probably have a heart attack in the holding cell. And honestly, that would be the best-case scenario. If the old man dies in prison, it saves me a fortune in nursing home fees later. He is worth more to me dead in a cell than alive in a guest room. I need that trust fund liquid by next week to pay off the Colombians. Let him rot. Russo clicked the stop button. The silence that followed was deafening. It rang in my ears louder than any explosion I had ever heard in combat. Let him rot. The words hung in the air. He didn't just want my money. He wanted my death. He saw my life not as the source of his existence, but as a line item on a spreadsheet that needed to be deleted to balance the books. He was calculating the cost of my heartbeat against the price of his debt. I sat there for a long time. I stared at my reflection in the one-way mirror. The man looking back at me was crying. He looked pathetic. He looked like a victim. And then something snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet click of a safety being disengaged. I felt a coldness spread through my chest, freezing the tears before they could fall. The shaking in my hands stopped. The nausea in my stomach vanished. The grief that had been drowning me receded, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. Clayton, the father, died in that chair. He took his last breath when he heard his son laugh about his death. And in his place, Clayton, the captain, woke up. The man who had flown C-130s through anti-aircraft fire. The man who knew how to navigate through a storm. The man who knew that when you are behind enemy lines, you do not cry. You execute the mission. I sat up straight. I rolled my shoulders back. I wiped my face with my sleeve. When I looked at Russo again, he saw the change. He saw the steel enter my eyes. Turn it off, I said. My voice was no longer raspy. It was level. It was commanding. Russo nodded slowly, a look of respect crossing his face. He put the recorder away. I assume you have a plan, Agent, I said. We do, Russo said, leaning forward. We have enough to arrest him for conspiracy, but we want the whole network. We want the money laundering operation. We want the suppliers. And to get that, we need him to confess to you. We need him to say it to your face while the tape is rolling. I nodded. I understood the tactical situation. I was the bait. What do you need me to do? I asked. Russo opened a metal case on the floor. It was filled with electronics. We are going to release you, he said. We will say there was a procedural error, insufficient evidence to hold you for more than 24 hours. We will put you on strict house arrest. You will call Derek. You will tell him you are scared. You will tell him you need help. You are going to go back to his house. You are going to be the terrified, confused old man he thinks you are. I watched as Russo pulled out a small sewing kit. He took a knife and cut the second button off my navy blazer. Then he took a new button from the kit. It looked identical to the others, but when he turned it over, I saw the microscopic lens and the gold contact points. Stand up, Russo ordered. I stood up. He sewed the button onto my jacket with quick, precise movements. This is a high-definition camera and a long-range microphone, Russo explained. It transmits in real time to our van. We will be parked 2 blocks away. We will hear everything. Then he handed me a shoe insert. It was thick and made of black rubber. Put this in your left shoe, he said. It is a GPS tracker and a backup audio bug. If he tries to move you, if he takes you to a second location, we will know. I took off my loafer and slid the insert inside. It was tight. It pressed against my heel. Good. The pain would keep me sharp. I put my shoe back on and stomped my foot to settle it. I buttoned my jacket. I looked at the camera lens disguised as a button. I am going into the lion's den, I said. Russo looked me in the eye. He is your son, Clayton. Are you sure you can do this? Are you sure you can look him in the face and lie to him? It is dangerous. If he suspects you are working with us, he might do something rash. I thought about the recording. I thought about the alpaca bear. I thought about the 20 years of love I had poured into a black hole. I don't have a son, I said coldly. My son died a long time ago. The man in that house is just a target. Russo handed me my phone. Call him, he said. Start the show. I took the phone. My thumb hovered over Derek's contact photo. It was a picture of us fishing on the lake 5 years ago. We were both smiling. I deleted the photo. I dialed the number. I took a deep breath, letting my shoulders slump, letting my face go slack. I forced the tremor back into my hands. I summoned the fear I had felt an hour ago, using it as a mask to cover the rage burning underneath. The phone rang twice. Hello, Derek's voice answered. He sounded annoyed, like I was interrupting something important. Derek, I wailed into the phone, pitching my voice high and frantic. Derek, please help me. They let me go, but I don't know what to do. I am so scared, son. Please come get me. I heard the pause on the other end. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head as he recalculated his plan. Dad, he said, his voice shifting instantly to fake concern. Oh my God, Dad. Are you okay? Where are you? Stay right there. I am coming to get you. Do not talk to anyone. I hung up the phone. I looked at Russo. The mask dropped from my face, revealing the stone beneath. He is coming, I said. Russo handed me a file. This is your release paperwork. It says you are pending further investigation. It looks real. Show it to him if he asks. I took the file. I walked to the door of the interrogation room. I paused with my hand on the handle. Agent Russo, I said. Yeah. When we are done, I want the button back. Why, he asked. Because I paid for this jacket, I said, and I am done letting him take things from me. I pushed the door open and stepped out into the hallway. The air was still cold, but I didn't feel it. I was burning with a mission. I was walking back into the world to destroy the life I had built so I could salvage what was left of my soul. The war had begun. 2 weeks before the metal cuffs snapped around my wrists at the airport, I was standing on the travertine patio of my son's $10 million estate overlooking Lake Washington. It was supposed to be a celebration. It was my 70th birthday. The air smelled of charcoal-grilled Wagyu beef and expensive perfume. A string quartet was playing a soft, sterilized version of classic rock songs in the corner. There were at least 50 people milling around the pool deck, holding flutes of champagne that cost more than my first car. I looked out at the sea of faces and realized with a pang of profound loneliness that I did not recognize a single soul. These were not my friends. My friends were retired mechanics and pilots who drank cheap beer and complained about their prostate exams. These people were Derek's business partners. They were investors. They were sharks in Italian suits who smiled with too many teeth. I was not the guest of honor at this party. I was the prop. I was the backdrop Derek used to project the image of a family man with deep roots and a legacy. I stood by the railing nursing a glass of sparkling water, feeling the damp ache in my shoulder that always flared up when rain was coming. I wanted to go home. I wanted to be in my quiet living room with my dog and a book. But Derek had insisted. He said 70 was a milestone. He said we had to do it big. Suddenly, the music stopped. Derek tapped a spoon against his crystal glass. The sharp, ringing sound cut through the chatter. "Everyone, please, can I have your attention?" He stood on a small riser near the pool holding a microphone. He looked handsome. He looked successful. He looked like everything I had hoped he would become. Tiffany stood next to him, her hand resting possessively on his arm. She was wearing a silver dress that shimmered like fish scales. "I want to make a toast," Derek announced, his voice thick with emotion. "To my father, Clayton Reeves, the man who started it all. The man who taught me that hard work isn't just a virtue, it is a necessity." "Dad, come up here." The crowd applauded politely. I felt my face heat up. I hated being the center of attention. I walked slowly to the riser, my knee clicking with every step. Derek put his arm around my shoulder. He pulled me close. I could smell the scotch on his breath, masked by mint. "Dad, you have spent your entire life providing for us," Derek said, looking into my eyes. I saw tears welling up in his ducts. At the time, I thought they were tears of gratitude. Now I know they were the result of years of acting classes. You sacrificed your youth flying into war zones. You sacrificed your retirement to build the company. And now it is time for you to rest. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick gold envelope. "We wanted to get you something special," he said. "Something you would never get for yourself." He handed me the envelope. I opened it. My fingers were stiff. Inside were plane tickets. First class. To Cartagena, Colombia, and a reservation at a 5-star resort. "Colombia," I said, confused. "Why Colombia?" "Because it is beautiful," Tiffany chimed in, her voice like syrup. "It is warm, Dad. The heat will be so good for your joints. You always talk about how the cold in Seattle hurts you. We want you to go and sit on a beach and drink rum and not worry about a single thing." The crowd said, "Oh," in unison. It was a perfect scene. The devoted son, the caring daughter-in-law, the grateful patriarch. But inside I felt a knot of anxiety. I didn't want to go to Colombia. I didn't want to travel alone. I was tired. The idea of navigating airports and customs in a foreign country felt exhausting, not relaxing. I don't know, son," I stammered, leaning away from the microphone. "That is very generous, but I am an old man. I am happy right here. I have my routine." Derek's grip on my shoulder tightened. It wasn't a hug anymore. It was a squeeze. "Dad, don't be like that." He whispered, his smile frozen in place for the audience. "Don't reject this. You are making us look bad. You are going, You deserve this." He turned back to the crowd. "He is speechless, folks. He loves it." He led me off the riser and toward a private cabana away from the guests. He sat me down on a plush sofa. I rubbed my left shoulder, wincing. The pain was sharp today. Tiffany was there instantly. She didn't wait for permission. She moved behind me and started massaging my neck. Her fingers were strong, digging into the tight muscles. "You are so tense, Clayton," she cooed. "You see, this is exactly why you need this trip. You are carrying the weight of the world. Let us take it from you." She signaled to a waiter who was hovering nearby. He brought a tray with a single glass of red wine. "Here," she said, taking the glass and pressing it into my hand. "Drink this. It is a special vintage Derek opened just for you. It will help with the pain. It will help you relax." I took a sip. It was heavy, oaky, and bitter. I took another sip. Within minutes, I felt a strange warmth spread through my limbs. The sharp edge of the pain in my shoulder dulled, but so did my focus. The lights of the party seemed to blur slightly. My eyelids felt heavy. Derek sat down across from me. He placed a stack of documents on the low table. "While you are relaxing, Dad, we just need to get the boring stuff out of the way," he said casually. "What is this?" I asked, squinting at the papers. The text seemed to swim on the page. "Just travel insurance," Derek said, "and some liability waivers for the resort. You know how litigious these places are. And a standard form authorizing me to handle any mail or decisions for the house while you are gone. Just in case a pipe bursts or something." He handed me a pen. It was a Mont Blanc, heavy, expensive. "I should read it," I mumbled, trying to focus on the top paragraph. My brain felt like it was wrapped in cotton. "Dad, come on," Oshkirik laughed softly. "It is a party. Do you really want to sit here and read fine print for an hour? It is standard boilerplate. Tiffany and I already reviewed it. Do you trust me?" He looked at me with those wide, earnest eyes. The eyes of the boy who used to ask me to check under his bed for monsters. I looked at Tiffany. She was smiling, nodding encouragingly, her hands still kneading my shoulders, keeping me in the chair, keeping me compliant. "Of course I trust you," I said. I put the pen to the paper. I signed my name. Wallace Clayton Reeves. I flipped the page. I signed again and again. I looked up as I signed the last page. For a split second, the sedatives or the wine or whatever was in my system seemed to clear. I saw them looking at the paper. I saw Derek's eyes. They weren't looking at me. They were fixed on the signature. There was a hunger there, a raw, naked greed that made him look like a starving animal staring at a piece of meat. Tiffany's tongue darted out to wet her lips. She looked like a cat that had just cornered a mouse. It sent a chill down my spine. But then Derek blinked, and the look was gone, replaced by the mask of the dutiful son. "Done," he said, snatching the papers away before the ink was even dry. He slid them into his jacket pocket. "Great," Tiffany said, patting my cheek. "Now you can really relax." I sat back in the cabana listening to the distant chatter of the party. I felt sick, but I told myself it was just the wine. I told myself I was being a paranoid old man. I told myself that my family loved me. I didn't know that I had just signed over temporary power of attorney for the company. I didn't know I had just authorized them to access the accounts. I didn't know I had just signed my own death warrant. I closed my eyes and let the darkness take me oblivious to the fact that the vultures were already picking my bones clean. The rain hammered against the cedar shingles of my house, the home I had built with my own hands 40 years ago. It sat on a quiet bluff overlooking the sound, filled with the scent of old wood and the lavender potpourri my late wife used to make. I was in the bedroom staring at the empty bed, trying to decide which shirts to pack for a trip I didn't want to take. My old leather duffel bag sat open on the quilt. It was scuffed, cracked, and smelled of engine oil and distant countries. It had been with me on every deployment in the Air Force. It had carried my uniform, my medals, and the letters from home. It was the only travel companion I trusted. Then the front door banged open downstairs. The silence was shattered by the clicking of high heels on the hardwood stairs. Tiffany breezed into the room without knocking. She brought a gust of cold air and expensive perfume that instantly overpowered the lavender. She was holding a large cardboard box and dragging a sleek gray suitcase on wheels behind her. "Oh, Clayton, you are not still staring at that pile of clothes, are you?" she said, shaking her head as if I were a slow child. "We have a schedule. The car will be here at 6 a.m. sharp." She parked the gray suitcase in the middle of the room. It looked alien against the warm wood tones of my sanctuary. It was hard, shiny, and soulless. "I am almost done," I said, reaching for a stack of linen trousers. "I just need to fit these into my duffel." Tiffany let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. She walked over to the bed and picked up my leather bag by one strap. She held it away from her body like it was a dead animal. "This thing," she asked, curling her lip. "Clayton, you cannot be serious. This bag is an embarrassment. It looks like something a hobo would carry. The leather is peeling, and quite frankly, it smells like a locker room." "It is a good bag," I said, defensively reaching for it. "It has history, Tiffany. That bag has flown more miles than you have driven in your entire life. History belongs in a museum, Clayton, not in a five-star resort," she snapped. Before I could stop her, she turned and marched to the hallway. She threw the bag down the stairs. I heard it tumble, the heavy brass buckles clanging against the steps, until it hit the bottom with a sad, defeated thud. "It is trash," she declared, dusting off her hands. "You are a Reeves. You need to look the part. Derek bought you this." She pointed to the gray monolith in the middle of the room. "It is top of the line. Polycarbonate shell, TSA-approved locks. And look, it has a built-in charger. Use this." I looked at the gray case. I wanted to argue. I wanted to go downstairs and retrieve my old friend. But I was tired. I was so tired of fighting them on every little thing. If using the new bag would make them happy, if it would stop the criticism for 5 minutes, I would do it. "Fine," I said softly. "I will use the gray one." "Good," Tiffany said, unzipping the case. It opened like a clam. "Now let's get you packed. But first, the most important thing." She turned to the cardboard box she had brought in. She opened it and pulled out the alpaca teddy bear. It was enormous. White, fluffy, and staring at me with black plastic eyes. It had a ridiculous blue ribbon tied around its neck. "You have to make room for Mr. Alpaca," she said, shoving the toy into my arms. I stared at it. It was absurd. "Tiffany," I said, trying to be reasonable. "I am a 70-year-old man. I cannot walk through an international airport carrying a giant stuffed animal. It will take up half the suitcase. I won't have room for my shoes." Tiffany's face crumpled instantly. Her lower lip trembled. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. "But Clayton," she whined. "It is from Leo, my grandson. The boy I hadn't seen in 6 months because they sent him to a boarding school in Connecticut. He called me last night." She lied, her voice thick with fake emotion. "He misses his grandpa so much. He picked this out online. He wants you to take it to Colombia. He wants you to take pictures of Mr. Alpaca on the beach and at the hotel. He calls it Flat Stanley. It is his way of being there with you." She put a hand on my arm, looking up at me with wide, pleading eyes. "Are you really going to break his heart, Clayton? He is just a little boy. He just wants to feel connected to you." The guilt hit me like a physical blow. I missed Leo. I missed reading to him. If this stupid bear was his way of reaching out to me, who was I to say no? "Okay," I sighed, defeated. "Okay. I will take the bear." Tiffany clapped her hands, the sadness vanishing instantly. "Perfect. You are the best grandpa ever." She took the bear from me and placed it carefully in the center of the gray suitcase. She packed my clothes around it, nesting it deep in the shell. She was meticulous about it, tucking socks and shirts around the sides, ensuring the bear wouldn't move. As she was folding my shirts, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. It vibrated loudly against the wood. She froze. She glanced at me, then snatched the phone up. I saw the screen for a split second. The brightness was turned up high. It was a text message. The sender was just a number, no name. The message was short. "The package is in position." I frowned. "Package, is everything okay?" I asked. "Is that Derek?" Tiffany tapped out a furious reply, her thumbs flying across the glass. She didn't look up. "No, just the caterer for next week," she said, her voice tight. "They are trying to switch the salmon to trout. Can you believe the incompetence? I told them the shipment had to be specific." She hit send and shoved the phone into her back pocket. She turned back to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was a smile that showed too many teeth. "Anyway, where were we, right?" "Toiletries." I watched her pack the rest of my things. A strange feeling settled in my gut. It wasn't quite suspicion, not yet. It was just a low hum of unease. "The package is in position." It seemed like a strange way to talk about fish, but I dismissed it. I looked around my bedroom. The walls felt like they were closing in. I felt old and out of touch. Maybe people talked like that now. Maybe I was just looking for reasons to be difficult because I didn't want to leave my house. Tiffany zipped the gray suitcase shut. She spun the combination lock. "There," she said, patting the hard plastic shell. "All ready. Now you get a good night's sleep. Derek will be here at 6 to drive you. Don't open the bag." "Okay, I got everything organized perfectly. If you rummage around, you will just mess it up." I nodded. "Thanks for helping, Tiffany." She walked to the door. She paused and looked back at me. For a second, her expression was unreadable. It wasn't kindness. It wasn't annoyance. It looked almost like pity. But then she blinked, and it was gone. "Have a safe trip, Clayton," she said. "Don't come back until you are fully relaxed." She walked out. I heard her heels retreating down the hall, then the front door closing. I stood alone in the silence of my bedroom. I looked at the gray suitcase standing in the middle of the floor. It looked like a tombstone. I walked to the window and looked out at the rain. I thought about Leo. I hoped he would like the pictures of the bear. I thought about the text message. "The package is in position." I shook my head. I was just a paranoid old man. My son was treating me to a vacation. My daughter-in-law packed for me. I should be grateful. I turned off the light and climbed into the empty bed, listening to the wind howl. I didn't know it then, but the storm outside was nothing compared to the one waiting for me inside that gray box. I closed my eyes and drifted into a fitful sleep, unaware that I was sleeping next to the evidence that would destroy my life. Cartagena was supposed to be a paradise of colonial architecture and Caribbean breezes, but for me it was a high-security prison with room service. I never stepped foot on the white sand beaches. I never walked the historic walled city. From the moment I landed, I was placed in the custody of a man named Mateo. Derek had introduced him as a private tour guide, a local expert hired to ensure my safety. But Mateo did not act like a guide. He acted like a warden. He was a mountain of a man, with dead eyes and a pistol bulge under his linen guayabera shirt. He took my passport the moment we checked into the suite. He said it was standard procedure for hotel registration, but he never gave it back. I spent 3 days pacing the marble floors of room 402. The air conditioning unit rattled in the wall, fighting a losing battle against the oppressive humidity. Every time I tried to leave the room, Mateo was there blocking the doorway with his massive frame. He would smile a smile that didn't show his teeth and say, "It is not safe out there, Mr. Reeves. The streets are dangerous for a man of your age. Let me order you some food. Stay inside. Watch television." It was solitary confinement disguised as luxury. I felt like a bird in a gilded cage. The gray suitcase sat in the corner like a silent monolith. The alpaca bear sat on the dresser staring at me with its plastic eyes. Tiffany texted me every few hours demanding photos. Take a picture of Mr. Alpaca on the balcony, she would write. Take a picture of him on the bed. It felt ridiculous. I felt like a senile old man playing with dolls, but I did it. I snapped the photos and sent them off thinking I was bonding with my grandson. I didn't know I was sending proof of life. I didn't know I was confirming that the package was still in my possession and that I was compliant. On the third afternoon, the phone in the room rang. It wasn't the hotel front desk, it was Derek. His voice sounded tinny and breathless over the international connection. Dad, he said, cutting off my greeting. Pack your bags. You are coming home, Paus. I looked at the clock. It was only Tuesday. The trip was supposed to last a week. But I just got here, son, I said, sitting on the edge of the bed. I haven't even seen the ocean yet. Mateo won't let me leave the room. Forget the ocean. Derek snapped, his impatience bleeding through the concern. Listen to me. Something has come up, a big surprise. I have a huge business deal closing on Thursday, and I want you there to celebrate. It is going to change everything for us. I already changed your ticket. You fly out tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. I rubbed my forehead. The headache that had started at the birthday party was back. Tomorrow, I asked. Derek, that is too soon. My joints are aching from the flight down here. I can't get back on a plane so soon. You have to. Dad. He insisted, his voice rising in pitch. I need you here. It is important to me. Don't be selfish. I spent a fortune to get you a last-minute first-class seat. The car is already arranged. Mateo will take you to the airport. Just get on the plane. He hung up before I could argue. I sat there holding the dead receiver, listening to the dial tone. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. It wasn't disappointment. It was suspicion. Why the rush? Why the aggression? He didn't sound like a son excited to share good news. He sounded like a general ordering a troop movement. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights flickering in the humid dusk. I watched the cargo ships moving slowly across the horizon, heading out to sea. I watched them and I wondered what was really happening. I didn't know the truth then. I was too blinded by my love for him to see the chessboard. I didn't know that Thursday was not a celebration. Thursday was the day a massive container ship named the Orion was scheduled to dock at the port of Seattle. Derek didn't need me home for a party. He needed me at the airport at exactly 9 a.m. He knew that a 70-year-old man getting busted with 2 kilograms of cocaine would trigger a massive security alert. He knew the Customs and Border Protection agents would swarm the passenger terminal. He knew the drug-sniffing dogs would be pulled from the cargo bay to the arrival hall to check for more mules. He knew the media would be there creating a circus. I was the distraction. I was the flare thrown into the sky to draw all eyes away from the water. While the agents were handcuffing me, while they were tearing apart that bear, while they were interrogating a confused old man, his real shipment would be sliding off a crane at the docks, completely uninspected. It was a classic military tactic. Diversion. The sacrificial lamb. He was willing to trade his father's freedom for a shipment of narcotics worth 10 times what was in my suitcase. The 2 kilos in the bear were just the cost of doing business. I wasn't a father to him. I was an expense. I was a decoy. I looked at the gray suitcase. I looked at the bear. Okay, I whispered to the empty room. I stood up and started to pack. I folded my shirts. I placed the bear back in its nest of foam and lies. I zipped the case shut. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the chair watching the door, waiting for Mateo. I felt a strange calm settle over me. It was the calm of a soldier before the battle. My subconscious was already warning me. My gut was screaming that I was walking into a trap, but I walked into it anyway, because I had to know. I had to see it through to the end. The next morning, Matteo drove me to the airport in silence. He didn't carry my bag. He watched me drag it to the check-in counter. He waited until I passed through security before he turned and left. He wasn't guiding me. He was delivering me. I boarded the plane. I took my seat in first class. I drank the champagne the flight attendant offered me. It tasted like vinegar. I looked out the window as the plane banked over the Caribbean Sea, turning north toward home, toward the trap, toward the handcuffs. I closed my eyes and pictured Derek's face. I am coming home, son, I thought, and I pray to God you are ready for me. Agent Russo walked me to the heavy steel doors that separated the secure zone from the public waiting area. He stopped and reached for his belt. The sound of the key turning in the handcuffs was loud in the quiet hallway. Metal scraped against metal, and then the pressure on my wrists released. I rubbed the red marks on my skin, feeling the blood rush back into my hands. I looked at Russo. He gave me a single sharp nod. It was the signal. The rehearsal was over. The curtain was going up. "Showtime, Clayton," he whispered. "Remember, you are terrified. You are confused. You are a man whose world has just ended. Do not let the soldier show." I took a deep breath. I let my shoulders slump forward. I allowed my mouth to hang slightly open. I focused on the tremor in my hands, amplifying it, until my whole body seemed to vibrate with fear. I wasn't just acting. I was channeling every ounce of heartbreak I had felt in that interrogation room and wearing it like a costume. Russo pushed the doors open. We stepped out into the bright, chaotic light of the arrivals hall. The noise of the airport hit me like a physical wave. Russo grabbed my arm not gently, but with a firm, controlling grip. He marched me a few steps forward, stopping right in the center of the walkway where anyone waiting would have a clear view. He raised his voice. It boomed over the chatter of the crowd, authoritative and dismissive. "You are free to go for now," Mr. Reeves Russo announced loud enough for the back row to hear. "We are releasing you due to insufficient evidence at this time to hold you on federal charges. However, do not leave the city. You are a person of interest. We will be watching you. Do not try to leave the jurisdiction or a warrant will be issued immediately." He let go of my arm with a shove that sent me stumbling forward a few steps. I caught my balance, looking around wildly like a trapped animal. I saw them instantly. Derek and Tiffany were standing near the baggage claim railing, exactly where I had left them. But their expressions had changed. They were no longer smiling. They were frozen. Derek looked like he had seen a ghost. His mouth was slightly open, his eyes wide with shock. He wasn't looking at me with relief. He was looking at me with disappointment. I wasn't supposed to walk through those doors. I was supposed to be in a holding cell. I was supposed to be gone. For a split second, I saw the panic in his eyes, the calculation, the realization that his perfect plan had just hit a snag. But Derek was a chameleon. He recovered faster than I expected. He blinked, and the shock vanished, replaced instantly by a mask of frantic, overacted concern. "Dad," he shouted. He ducked under the velvet rope and sprinted toward me. He ignored the dirty looks from other travelers. He reached me and threw his arms around me. It was a crushing hug. To anyone watching, it looked like a loving son relieved to see his father. But I felt the truth. His body was rigid, and his hands were not patting my back in comfort. They were moving. They were patting down the sides of my jacket. They were sliding over my breast pocket. They were checking my waist. He was frisking me. He was looking for paperwork. He was looking for the asset seizure notice. He was looking for the document that said the government had frozen my accounts because of the drug charges. That was the only thing he cared about. He didn't care that I was free. He cared if the money was still accessible. Oh my God. "Dad," he cried into my ear, his voice loud and trembling. "I was so scared. I saw them take you. What happened? Did they hurt you?" I stood there limp in his arms, feeling the hard plastic of the GPS tracker digging into my heel and the tiny camera lens on my jacket recording every second of his fake embrace. I don't know, son, I stammered, making my voice crack. I don't know what happened. They said there were drugs in the bear. In Leo's bear. I pulled back slightly to look at him. I needed the camera to see his face. Derek gripped my shoulders. His eyes searched mine, looking for any sign of suspicion. Drugs, he repeated, acting horrified. That is impossible. Dad, did you pack it? Did you leave your bag unattended? Did you buy anything from strangers? He was already building the narrative. He was already planting the seeds of my senility. I didn't do anything. I wailed, letting a tear slip down my cheek. I just brought the bear like Tiffany asked. I don't understand, Derek. They said I am a criminal. Tiffany was beside us now. She didn't hug me. She stood a foot away, her arms crossed over her chest, her eyes scanning the room. She was looking at the security cameras. She was looking at Russo, who was standing by the doors, watching us with a stone face. She looked at me with cold, calculating eyes. There was no relief in her face, only annoyance. She looked at Derek and gave a subtle shake of her head. He doesn't have the papers, she murmured, barely moving her lips. Derek let go of me. He ran a hand through his hair, performing the role of the stressed son. Okay, calm down, Dad, he said. It is a mistake. Clearly it is a mistake. We will fix this. He looked at Tiffany. I saw the silent communication pass between them. The panic of the failed plan was settling in. They needed a new strategy. They couldn't let me go back to my house. If I went home, I might call a lawyer. I might look at my bank accounts. I might figure out that the house was already listed for sale. Tiffany stepped closer. She put a hand on Derek's arm and leaned in. She thought I was a deaf, confused old man. She thought I was too rattled to hear. Plan B. She whispered, her voice sharp and low. We can't let him out of our sight. If the feds are watching, we need to control the narrative. Take him to our house. Derek nodded. He turned back to me, his face softening into a sickening display of sympathy. Dad, listen to me, he said, taking my hand. You can't go home tonight. You are too upset. And that agent said they are watching you. I don't want you being alone. I just want my own bed, Derek, I said, looking at the floor. I just want to go home. No, absolutely not. Tiffany interjected. Her voice was firm, like she was speaking to a toddler. Your house is isolated, Clayton. If the police come back, who will help you? You are staying with us. We have the guest room ready. We can take care of you there. Take care of me. The phrase sounded like a threat. They wanted me under their roof. They wanted me where they could monitor my calls, control my movements, and probably drug me into a stupor until they could figure out how to get me committed. I hesitated. I looked back at Agent Russo. He was still standing there. He gave a tiny, almost invisible nod. Go with them. I looked back at my son. I saw the desperation behind his eyes. He needed me in his car. He needed me in his cage. Okay, I whispered, letting my shoulders drop in defeat. Okay, son. Whatever you say. I don't know what to do. I trust you. A flash of relief washed over Derek's face. It was the relief of a jailer who has just secured a loose prisoner. Good, he said. Good. Come on. The car is right outside. Let's get you out of here. He put his arm around me again, guiding me toward the exit. He walked fast, almost dragging me. Tiffany walked on my other side, boxing me in. We moved through the terminal like a three-headed beast. As we walked, I felt the button on my jacket pressing against my chest. I felt the tracker in my shoe. I was walking into the trap. I was going to the place where they planned to bury me. But as we stepped through the automatic doors into the cold, gray Seattle afternoon, I didn't feel fear. I felt a strange, cold satisfaction. They thought they were taking a helpless old man home to finish him off. They didn't know they were bringing the surveillance team right into their living room. They were inviting the evidence collector to dinner. I leaned into Derek, putting my weight on him, making him carry me. "Thank you, son," I mumbled. "Thank you for taking care of me." "Don't worry, Dad," Derek said, checking his phone as we walked. "We will get this all sorted out." I looked at the screen of his phone reflected in the glass door as we passed. He was texting someone. "He is out. Bringing him to the safe house. Call the doctor." I closed my eyes and let them lead me to the car. The game was on, and I was ready to play. The rain in Seattle does not fall like it does in other places. It does not cleanse. It soaks. It permeates. As we pulled into the driveway of the house I had lived in for 40 years, the sky was a bruised purple weeping, a relentless icy drizzle that blurred the windshield of Derek's luxury SUV. I stared at the house. It was a craftsman bungalow I had restored with my own hands after the war. I knew every shingle. I knew the squeak of the third step on the porch. I knew the way the light hit the kitchen table in the morning. But sitting there in the passenger seat staring at it through the rain, it looked like a stranger. The windows were dark. The blinds were drawn tight, something I never did. It looked abandoned. It looked dead. Derek put the car in park but left the engine running. The windshield wipers slapped back and forth, a metronome counting down the seconds of my patience. "Stay here, Dad," Derek said, unbuckling his seatbelt. "I just want to check something before you get out." I ignored him. I needed to act erratic. I needed to act like a frightened old man, desperate for the safety of his sanctuary. I fumbled with the door handle, pushing it open before he could stop me. "I just want to go inside," I cried out, stepping into the rain. "I just want my chair. I want to see Mom's picture." I shuffled up the walkway, ignoring the water soaking into my blazer, ignoring the cold seeping into the camera lens button sewn onto my chest. I reached the front door. My hand shaking, I pulled my keychain from my pocket. I found the brass key, the one that had opened this door for decades. I slid it into the lock. It didn't fit. I frowned. I pushed harder. The key hit metal and stopped. I pulled it back and tried again, jamming it in, twisting it. Nothing. I leaned in closer, squinting through the water on my glasses. The lock was new. It wasn't the aged brass deadbolt I had installed in '95. It was shiny chrome. A smart lock with a keypad. "They changed it," I whispered, panic rising in my throat. It wasn't acting this time. It was the violation of it. They had locked me out of my own life. Derek was beside me, instantly grabbing my wrist. "Dad, stop!" he shouted over the rain. "Stop it! You are going to break the key." "Why doesn't it work?" I yelled, turning to him, letting the rain mix with the tears on my face. "This is my house. Why can't I get in?" Derek pulled me back from the door. He looked around the neighborhood nervously, checking to see if Mrs. Higgins next door was watching. "I told you, Dad," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush. "The police. When they raided the house looking for evidence, they seized the property. They changed the locks. It is a crime scene now. Nobody can go in. It is sealed." He was lying. I knew he was lying. The police would put up tape. They would leave a notice. They wouldn't install a brand new $300 smart lock. This was him. He had changed the locks the moment I got on the plane to Colombia. He had stolen my home before I was even arrested. "But I have clothes in there." I whimpered, slumping against the doorframe. "I have your mother's things." "They are safe," Derek promised, steering me away from the door. "The police are cataloging everything. It is all safe. But we can't stay here. If they see us, they will arrest you again for violating the seal. We have to go, now." He tried to pull me toward the car, but I resisted. I pulled away and stumbled toward the side of the house, toward the garage. "I need to see," I shouted. "I need to see if my tools are there." "Dad." No, Derek yelled, chasing after me. I reached the garage window. It was high up, but I was tall enough to see inside. I wiped the condensation and grime off the glass with my sleeve. I pressed my face against the cold pane. Lightning flashed overhead, illuminating the interior of the garage for a split second. And in that flash, I saw the truth. The garage wasn't empty. It was filled with cardboard boxes, dozens of them. They were stacked haphazardly against the wall, piled almost to the ceiling. They were marked with thick black marker. Kitchen, living room, master bedroom. And in the corner near a pile of garbage bags, I saw a clear plastic bin. Inside, pressed against the side, was the quilt my wife Martha had made for our 25th anniversary. It was wadded up, crushed. Next to it was a framed photo of us on our honeymoon, the glass cracked, thrown carelessly on top of a stack of old magazines. They weren't cataloging evidence. They were staging the house. They had cleared out 40 years of memories in 2 days. They were treating my life, my history, my wife's legacy, like trash to be hauled to the dump. A fire ignited in my belly, hot and white. It burned through the cold rain. It burned through the act. I wanted to smash the window. I wanted to climb in there and retrieve my wife's quilt. I wanted to turn around and wrap my hands around Derek's throat and squeeze until he confessed. I gripped the windowsill so hard my knuckles turned white. I could feel the growl rising in my throat. I was about to break character. I was about to end the mission right there. But then I felt the hard rubber insert in my shoe pressing against my heel. The GPS tracker. And I heard Agent Russo's voice in my head clear as a bell. He is not your son. He is a target. If you break now, he wins. If you break now, he keeps the money and you go to prison. Endure. I closed my eyes. I forced the image of the crushed quilt into a box in my mind and locked it tight. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I let go of the windowsill. When I turned back to Derek, I wasn't the vengeful soldier. I was the broken old man again. They are throwing it away, I sobbed, pointing at the window with a trembling hand. Look, Derek. They put Mom's quilt in the trash. Derek didn't even look. He just grabbed my arm and pulled. I know, Dad. I know, he said, his voice void of empathy. It is standard procedure. They have to search everything for drugs. We will get it back later. I promise. But we have to go, please. You are freezing. He dragged me back to the car. I didn't fight him this time. I let him lead me. I walked with a shuffle, head down, defeated. But as I climbed into the passenger seat, as the warmth of the heater hit my wet face, I made a silent vow to the house standing dark in the rain. I will be back. I will buy new locks. And I will burn the boxes that Derek packed. Derek got in the driver's seat. He locked the doors. He let out a long exhale, the tension leaving his shoulders. He thought he had handled me. He thought the crisis was averted. He pulled his phone out and sent a quick text. Close call. He saw the boxes, but he bought the police story. Bringing him in now. I stared out the window as we backed out of the driveway. I watched my house disappear into the rain and the gloom. Take me to your house, son, I whispered, staring at my reflection in the dark glass. I don't want to be alone. You won't be, Dad, Derek said, putting the car in drive. Tiffany has the guest room all ready for you. You will be safe there. Safe. I touched the button on my chest. Yes, son, I thought. I will be right where I need to be, in the heart of the enemy camp. And I am not leaving until I burn it to the ground. The digital clock on the microwave read 2 a.m, but the living room of my son's villa was bright with the blue glow of architectural lighting. They did not put me in the guest room. They did not put me in a bed with sheets and pillows. Derek said it was for my safety. He said the guest room was upstairs, and he was worried I might fall down the steps in my confused state. He said he wanted me on the ground floor, right in the center of the house, so he could hear me if I called out in the night. It was a lie. He put me on the white leather sectional in the living room because it had a direct line of sight from the kitchen and the hallway. He put me there because it was a fishbowl. I was not a guest. I was a prisoner on display. I lay on the sofa, still wearing my damp clothes. They had given me a thin cashmere throw blanket that offered no warmth. My shoes were still on my feet. I refused to take them off. I told them my feet were cold, but the truth was I needed the GPS tracker in my heel to stay exactly where it was. I needed Agent Russo to know I was stationary. Tiffany walked into the room. She was wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than my monthly pension. She held a steaming mug in her hands. The smell hit me before she even reached the sofa. It was hot milk and honey, but underneath the sweetness was the acrid chemical tang of crushed pills. I knew that smell. I had smelled it in the field hospitals during the war. Sedatives. Strong ones. "Here, Clayton." She said, her voice dripping with that fake maternal sweetness she used when she wanted to manipulate me. "Drink this. It will help you sleep. You have had such a traumatic day. You are shaking." I sat up. I took the mug with both hands, letting my tremors spill a little of the hot liquid onto my knuckles. "Thank you," I whispered. "You are a good girl, Tiffany, taking care of a useless old man." She smiled. It was a tight, dismissive smile. "Just drink it all. Every drop. We need you rested for tomorrow." I lifted the cup to my lips. I pretended to take a long swallow, but I clamped my throat shut. I let the liquid touch my lips and then pulled it away, making a satisfied sound. "It is hot," I said. "I will let it cool for a minute." Tiffany watched me for a second, her eyes narrowing. She was suspicious. She stayed there until her phone chimed in the kitchen. She turned her head. That was the window. As soon as her back turned, I leaned over the side of the sofa. There was a large potted fiddle leaf fig tree next to the armrest. I poured the entire mug into the dark soil. The white liquid disappeared instantly into the dirt. I sat back up, wiping my mouth with my sleeve. When Tiffany turned back, I held up the empty mug. "All gone," I said. "I feel sleepy already." "Good," she said, taking the mug from my hand. "Go to sleep, Clayton. Don't worry about anything. We have everything under control." She walked back to the kitchen. I lay down. I pulled the blanket up to my chin. I waited 5 minutes, then 10. Then I began the performance. I started with a soft, rhythmic breathing. Then I let it catch in my throat. I added a snore. Not a loud, cartoonish snore, but the deep, rattling wheeze of an old man in a deep, drug-induced coma. It worked. I heard footsteps. Derek walked over to the sofa. He stood over me. I could feel his presence. I could smell the scotch on his breath. He leaned down. He waved a hand in front of my face. I didn't flinch. I kept my eyes closed, my breathing heavy and even. "He is out," Derek called out softly. "He is down for the count. That crushed Xanax works fast." I heard the pop of a cork. They were opening wine. They were celebrating. Derek and Tiffany sat at the dining table, which was part of the open floor plan, only about 20 feet away from where I lay. They thought I was unconscious. They thought I was a piece of furniture. "Put it on speaker," Derek said. "I want to get this over with." I heard the dial tone, then a ringing sound. A voice answered. It was deep, gravelly, and accented. It wasn't a lawyer. It was the man from the photos Russo had shown me. The man at the docks. "What happened?" the voice barked. "Why isn't he in custody? I saw the news. They released him." "Calm down, Rocco," Derek said, his voice smooth and arrogant. It was a hiccup. The feds didn't have enough to hold him. They released him on a technicality. But he is here. He is with me. "Is he talking?" Rocco asked. "No," Derek laughed. "He is terrified. He thinks it is all a big misunderstanding. He thinks I am saving him. I have him sedated on the couch right now. He won't wake up until noon tomorrow." I slid my hand under the blanket. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the pen Russo had given me. It looked like a standard ballpoint pen, but the top button was the trigger for a high-sensitivity microphone. I clicked it once. A tiny vibration told me it was recording. I angled the clip of the pen toward the dining room. "So what is the play?" Rocco asked. "The shipment is already at the warehouse, but I don't like loose ends. If the old man talks, if he looks at the accounts, we are exposed." "He won't talk," Derek said. "I am pivoting to the medical contingency." "What does that mean?" "I spent the last 3 hours forging a new set of medical records," Derek said. The sound of papers shuffling echoed through the room. "I have a doctor on payroll who just signed off on a diagnosis. Acute early-onset Alzheimer's accelerated by the trauma of the airport incident." My blood ran cold. Alzheimer's. The ultimate silencer. If I was diagnosed with dementia, nothing I said would matter. No judge would believe me. No bank would listen to me. "I am filing the emergency commitment papers in the morning," Derek continued. "By noon tomorrow, a private ambulance will be here to transport him to the state facility in Joliet. It is a lockdown unit. No phones, no visitors. He will be medicated and isolated." "And the assets?" Rocco asked. "Once he is committed, the power of attorney clause kicks in fully," Derek said. "I become the sole guardian of the estate. I can liquidate the trust without his signature. I will wire your $5 million by 2 p.m. tomorrow." I lay there frozen in a block of ice. They weren't just going to steal my money. They were going to steal my mind. They were going to lock me in a room and drug me until I actually did lose my sanity. They were going to erase Clayton Reeves from the face of the earth and replace him with a drooling invalid. Tiffany chimed in, her voice slurring slightly from the wine. "Make sure it is the state facility, Derek," she said. "I checked the prices on the private ones. They are too expensive. We need that money for the renovation. The state facility is free." "Wow." Rocco laughed. "You two are cold." "That is your father." "He is not a father," Derek said, his voice dropping to a low, hateful murmur. "He is an obstacle. He has been sitting on that money for years, flying his little planes, fixing his little cars, wasting it. I am just correcting a market inefficiency." I squeezed the pen so hard I thought the plastic would crack. "He is an obstacle." The last thread of attachment snapped. The grief I had felt earlier that day was gone. The shock was gone. In its place was a calm, lethal clarity. I wasn't his father anymore. I was his enemy, and he had just given me the battle plans. "Okay," Rocco said. "Wire the money tomorrow." And Derek, "Yeah. If he doesn't get on that ambulance, if there are any more hiccups, I am not coming for the money. I am coming for you." "I got it," Derek said. The call ended. I heard glasses clinking. "To the new house," Tiffany said. "To freedom," Derek replied. I lay there listening to them drink. I listened to them laugh. I listened to them planning the color of the new curtains they would buy with my life savings. I waited until they went upstairs. I waited until the lights went out. Then I opened my eyes in the dark. I looked at the ceiling. "You want to send me to an institution, son," I thought. "You want to play the medical game." I touched the camera button on my jacket. "I have a different diagnosis for you." I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, sharpening my mind like a knife, waiting for the sun to rise. Because when the sun came up, the ambulance wasn't coming for me. It was coming for them. The morning sun sliced through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the villa, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air like tiny suspended diamonds. It was a perfect Seattle morning, the kind of morning where the sky is a piercing, impossible blue and the water of the lake glitters like a sheet of hammered silver. But inside the house, the air was thick enough to choke on. It smelled of freshly ground coffee, expensive bacon, and the sour metallic tang of impending betrayal. I sat at the head of the dining table. I was wearing the same wrinkled clothes I had slept in. My navy blazer was rumpled, and my face was covered in a day's worth of gray stubble. I looked exactly like what they wanted me to be, A derelict, a confused, broken old man losing his grip on reality. Derek sat to my right. He was dressed in a sharp Italian suit, his hair perfectly gelled, his Rolex gleaming on his wrist. He was scrolling through his phone with a manic intensity, his thumb twitching against the screen. I knew what he was checking. He was checking the bank routing numbers for the offshore accounts. He was checking the time. He was counting down the minutes until he could legally declare me incompetent and drain the lifeblood of my legacy. Tiffany sat across from him. She wasn't eating. She was staring out the window, her fingers drumming a nervous rhythm on the granite tabletop. She looked pale. Maybe the wine from last night was catching up with her, or maybe, just maybe, some small shriveled part of her conscience was trying to scream. "Dad, you should eat," Derek said, not looking up from his phone. "You barely touched your eggs. You need your strength." I looked down at the plate. The scrambled eggs looked like yellow rubber. "I am not hungry," I mumbled, keeping my voice tremulous and weak. "I just want to go home, Derek. When can I go home?" Derek sighed. It was a theatrical sigh, loud and filled with a practiced patience. "We talked about this, Dad," he said, finally putting the phone down. "You can't go home. The police sealed the house. Remember, you are confused again. This is exactly why we need to get you some help." He looked at Tiffany. She nodded a sharp, jerky motion. Just then, the doorbell rang. It wasn't a friendly chime. It was a heavy, resonant dong that echoed through the cavernous house like a funeral toll. Derek jumped up. He moved too fast. He knocked his chair back, the legs scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "That must be them," he said, smoothing his tie. "Who?" I asked, gripping the edge of the table. "Who is at the door?" Derek didn't answer me. He walked to the foyer. I heard the heavy front door open. I heard low voices, then the sound of heavy boots on the wood. Derek walked back into the dining room. He wasn't alone. Two men followed him. They were dressed in white uniforms that looked like medical scrubs, but they didn't fit right. The fabric was tight across their chests and arms. These weren't doctors. They were bouncers. They were muscle for hire, wrapped in the costume of care. One of them was holding a black duffel bag. The zipper was open, and sticking out of the top was a flash of heavy canvas and leather straps. A straitjacket. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced myself to stay seated. I forced myself to look small. "Dad," Derek said, walking over to me. He stood behind my chair, putting his hands on my shoulders. His grip was firm. It was a restraint. "These are the specialists I told you about. Dr. Evans and his assistant. They are from the state facility. They are here to take you to a place where you can get the care you need." I looked at the men. They didn't smile. They didn't introduce themselves. They just stared at me with the dead, bored eyes of men who were used to dragging screaming people into vans. "I don't need care," I whined, shrinking away from Derek's hands. "I am fine. I just want to go to my house." Derek leaned down. His face was close to mine. I could smell the mint mouthwash masking the stale scotch. "You are not fine, Dad," he whispered. "You have Alzheimer's." The doctor confirmed it. "You are forgetting things. You are violent. You are a danger to yourself. That is why the police released you to me. Because you are sick." He signaled to the men. They stepped forward. The one with the bag reached in and pulled out the restraint. It was white, clinical, and terrifying. "Please, Mr. Reeves," the larger man said, his voice flat. "Make this easy. Stand up and extend your arms. We don't want to have to sedate you here." Tiffany stood up. She walked to the corner of the room, hugging herself. She couldn't watch. She wanted the money, but she didn't have the stomach for the slaughter. I looked at the straitjacket. I looked at Derek. He was smiling sadly, a performance for the benefit of his hired goons. "It is for the best, Dad," he said. "Just go with them. You will be safe there. You can rest." Rest. That was the word. That was the trigger. I closed my eyes for a second. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the coffee and the lies. I let the air fill my lungs, expanding my chest. I felt the button camera pressing against my skin. I felt the tracker in my shoe grounding me to the earth. I stopped shaking. I opened my eyes. I didn't look at the floor. I didn't look at the straitjacket. I looked directly into Derek's eyes. The change was instant. Derek saw it. He saw the fog clear from my gaze. He saw the weakness evaporate, replaced by a gaze as cold and hard as a granite tombstone. He took a step back, his hands falling from my shoulders. "Dad." He stammered, his brow furrowing. I stood up. I didn't struggle to rise. I pushed the chair back with a single controlled motion. I stood to my full height. I was 70 years old, but in that moment I was 6'2" of military-trained discipline. I reached up and adjusted my collar, smoothing the lapels of my rumpled blazer. I brushed a crumb off my sleeve. "I am not going to rest, Derek," I said. My voice was no longer the high-pitched whine of a confused geriatric. It was the deep, commanding baritone that had once ordered drops over hostile territory. Derek froze. The two orderlies stopped moving, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "I am not going to a hospital." I continued stepping around the chair so there was nothing between us. "And I certainly do not have Alzheimer's." What? Derek laughed nervously, looking at Tiffany. "What is he talking about?" "The dementia is talking. Grab him." The men moved to grab me. I held up a single finger. "Sit down," I barked. The command was so authoritative, so unexpected, that the lead orderly actually hesitated. Derek's face went from confusion to fear. He realized the game had changed, even if he didn't understand how. "Dad, stop this," he hissed. "You are making a scene." I looked at him with pure disgust. "You wanted a meeting, son," I said. "You wanted to discuss the assets. You wanted to discuss the trust." I checked my watch. "Well, you are in luck, because I have a meeting scheduled right now." "With who?" Derek shouted, losing his composure. "With the voices in your head." "No," I said. "With the federal government." Crash! The front door didn't just open, it exploded inward. The sound was like a thunderclap inside the house. Derek spun around. Tiffany screamed. "Federal agents," a voice roared. "Get on the ground! Now!" A wave of black tactical gear flooded into the foyer. It was a sea of helmets, shields, and assault rifles. They moved with the precision of a machine. They didn't stop at the door. They swept into the dining room, their boots thudding heavy on the floor. Agent Russo was at the front. He wasn't wearing a suit today. He was wearing a tactical vest with HSI emblazoned in yellow across the chest. He had his weapon drawn, but it wasn't pointed at me. It was pointed at the two men in the white scrubs. "Drop the bag," Russo ordered. "Hands on your heads." The hired muscle dropped the straitjacket instantly. They knew the difference between bullying an old man and facing a federal SWAT team. They were on their knees in seconds. Derek stood frozen in the center of the room. He looked at the agents. He looked at me. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. He looked like a child who had just realized the monster under the bed was real. "Dad," he whispered, his voice trembling. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything," I said, walking over to Agent Russo. Russo holstered his weapon. He reached out and shook my hand. "Good morning, Mr. Reeves," he said. "We got the audio from last night. Crystal clear. And the video from the button. The warrant was signed 10 minutes ago." He turned to Derek. "Derek Reeves, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit money laundering, wire fraud, kidnapping, and attempted murder." "Murder?" Derek shrieked. "I never touched him." Russo pointed at the straitjacket on the floor. "You hired unauthorized personnel to abduct a federal witness and transport him to a facility with the intent of permanently silencing him. In the eyes of the law, that is as good as pulling the trigger." Tiffany tried to run. She bolted toward the kitchen, maybe thinking she could get to the back door. Two agents intercepted her before she made it 3 steps. They spun her around and slammed her against the refrigerator. The sound of the handcuffs clicking was the sweetest music I had ever heard. It wasn't me, she screamed, thrashing against the agents. It was Derek. He made me do it. I just wanted to redecorate the house. I looked at Derek. An agent was pulling his arms behind his back. He wasn't screaming. He was staring at me. He was staring at the button on my jacket. You wore a wire, he whispered, the betrayal in his voice so rich it was almost funny. You wore a wire on your own son. I walked up to him. I leaned in close, just like he had done to me at the table. You stopped being my son when you packed cocaine in my grandson's teddy bear, I said quietly. You stopped being my son when you decided to sell my life for $5 million. I reached up and ripped the button off my jacket. I held it up so he could see the tiny lens. Smile, Derek, I said. You're on camera. The agents hauled him away. He didn't fight. He just hung his head, defeated by the old man he thought was too weak to survive. I stood in the center of the beautiful, sunny room. The silence returned, but the air was no longer heavy. It was light. It was clean. Russo walked over to me. Are you okay, Clayton? He asked. I looked at the empty table. I looked at the cold eggs. I looked at the straitjacket lying on the floor like a shed skin. I smoothed my blazer. I stood up straight. I am fine, Agent, I said. I am finally awake. The room was securing into a controlled chaos of federal agents cataloging evidence and securing the perimeter, but I was not finished yet. There was one last thing I needed to do. One last nail I needed to drive into the coffin of our relationship. I walked over to the massive 80-inch flat-screen television mounted above the fireplace. It was the centerpiece of the room. A black monolith that Derek had bragged cost more than my first house. It was a symbol of his vanity. Now it would be the instrument of his destruction. I pulled my phone from my pocket. My hands were steady. I tapped the screen-casting icon. The television flickered to life. The smart system recognized my device immediately. A loading circle spun for a second, and then the room was filled with a high-definition image of this very living room bathed in the blue light of evening. Wait, Agent Russo, I said, raising my voice over the squawk of the police radios. Hold them for a minute. They need to see this. Russo nodded to his team. The agents holding Derek and Tiffany paused, turning them toward the screen. I pressed play. The audio boomed through the surround sound speakers. It was crystal clear. Every nuance of arrogance, every drop of disdain was amplified to a cinema-quality volume. On the screen, Derek was sitting at the dining table holding a glass of wine. He looked relaxed. He looked like a king surveying his kingdom. He is not a father, the video, Derek said, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. He is an obstacle. He has been sitting on that money for years, wasting it. I watched the real Derek. He flinched as if he had been struck. He stared at his own image, unable to look away. He was watching his own soul being laid bare. I am just correcting a market inefficiency, the video voice continued. Then came the laughter, the clinking of glasses, the planning of the mental institution, the discussion about the cheap state facility versus the private one. He will be medicated and isolated, the video, Derek promised. I will liquidate the trust without his signature. The air in the room seemed to vanish, sucked out by the vacuum of their cruelty. The federal agents who had seen everything in their line of work looked from the screen to the cowering couple with expressions of pure disgust. It was one thing to read a transcript. It was another to see a son drinking expensive wine while plotting to lobotomize his father for cash. Tiffany made a sound like a wounded animal. It was a high, shrill keen that tore through the audio of the video. She wasn't looking at the screen anymore. She was looking at the ruin of her life. She realized that this video wasn't just evidence. It was viral. It would be played in court. It would be played on the news. Her social standing, her reputation, her future as a socialite was evaporating in real time. "No," she screamed. "Turn it off. You can't show this. It is illegal. You recorded us without consent." She lunged. It was a desperate, feral move. She broke free from the agent holding her arm and threw herself toward the fireplace. She reached for a heavy brass poker from the hearth. She wanted to smash the screen. She wanted to break the mirror that was showing her ugly reflection. She didn't make it 2 steps. Agent Russo moved with a speed that belied his size. He intercepted her, slamming her against the wall before she could even lift the metal rod. He spun her around and zip-tied her hands behind her back tighter this time. "That is destruction of evidence," Mrs. Reeves Russo barked. "Add it to the list." I didn't flinch. I didn't turn the video off. I let it play to the end. I let them hear the part where they toasted to freedom. I let them hear the silence that followed. Only when the screen went black did I lower the phone. I looked at Derek. He had collapsed. His legs had given out, and the agents were holding him up by his armpits. He wasn't standing anymore. He was kneeling. He was kneeling on the expensive Persian rug he had bought with money he stole from the company accounts. He looked up at me. His face was wet with tears and snot. The arrogance was gone. The suit was just a costume now. Beneath it, he was just a scared little boy who had played with matches and burned the house down. "Dad." "Please," he sobbed. His voice was broken. "Dad, you have to listen. I was forced. I didn't want to do it." He tried to crawl toward me, dragging the agents with him. "It was Rocco," he cried. "The loan shark. I owe him $5 million, Dad. I made some bad bets. I lost it all. He said he would kill me. He said he would cut me up and feed me to the pigs if I didn't pay him by Friday. I was scared. I did it to survive. You have to understand. I am your son. You can't let them take me." I looked down at him. I looked at the man who had once been the center of my universe. I remembered teaching him to ride a bike. I remembered his graduation. I remembered the pride I felt when he took over the business. But then I remembered the alpaca bear. I remembered the 2 kilograms of poison. I remembered the phrase, "let him rot." He wasn't sorry he did it. He was sorry he got caught. He wasn't crying for me. He was crying for himself. I reached into the inside pocket of my blazer. I didn't pull out a handkerchief to dry his tears. I didn't pull out a checkbook to pay his debts. I pulled out a single folded sheet of paper. It was crisp and white. I walked over to him. I stood right in front of him, so he had to look up at me. "You say you did it to survive," I said, my voice low and steady. "You say you owe $5 million. I unfolded the paper. It was a draft of my last will and testament. I had written it the night before in the safe house with the lawyer Russo provided. "This was my will," I said, holding it up. "Before yesterday, it said that upon my death, everything goes to my beloved son Derek. The house, the company, the trust, $50 million. Derek's eyes widened. He stared at the paper as if it were a holy relic. I took a pen from my pocket. I uncapped it. I placed the paper against the wall next to the television. I drew a thick, heavy line through his name. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was loud in the silence. I crossed it out once, then again, until the name Derek Reeves was nothing but a black smear of ink. "You are right about one thing," I said, turning back to him. "The money will be used, but not to pay your debts, and not to buy your freedom." I folded the paper and put it back in my pocket. "I am liquidating the assets," I announced. "Every dime. The house, the cars, the land, and I am donating the entire sum to the Veterans Administration." I leaned down so my face was inches from his. "We are going to build a rehabilitation center for drug addicts, Derek. We are going to build a place to save the people that you and your friends were trying to poison." Derek gasped. The air left him. "No," he whispered. "You can't. That is my money. It is my birthright. Your birthright was my name, I said, standing up. And you sold it cheap. I turned to Agent Russo. Get them out of my sight, I said. The agents hauled them up. Derek started screaming. He screamed about the money. He screamed about fairness. He screamed that I was insane. But as they dragged him out the front door into the back of the waiting armored van, his voice faded. I stood alone in the living room. The TV screen was black again. The house was quiet. I walked to the window and watched them drive away. I watched my son disappear. I felt a tear run down my cheek. I let it fall. It was the last tear I would ever shed for him. I touched the empty pocket where the bear used to be. "Goodbye, Derek," I whispered. Then I turned my back on the window and walked out of the house. I had a plane to catch, and this time I was flying my own course. The silence that followed the arrest was louder than the sirens. For the first week, I stayed in a hotel by the airport. I couldn't go back to the villa. It was a crime scene wrapped in yellow tape. And I couldn't go back to my bungalow. It was a mausoleum of betrayed memories. I spent those days sitting in a generic room with beige walls, drinking black coffee, and staring at the rain streaking the window. My phone rang incessantly. Reporters, lawyers, friends I hadn't heard from in 20 years who suddenly wanted to know the real story. I didn't answer a single call. I was in a decompression chamber waiting for the bends to hit. On the 10th day, a letter arrived via my attorney. It was from the King County Jail. The envelope was cheap, rough paper. The handwriting was jagged, frantic. It was from Derek. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Ms. Cheng, who Agent Russo had recommended, slid it across the table at a diner where we met. "He wants you to read it before the arraignment, Mr. Reeves," she said, her voice neutral. "He claims he has information about the cartel that puts you in danger. He says he can only tell you in person." I looked at the envelope. I saw my name written in the hand I had taught to hold a pencil. I remembered sitting at the kitchen table guiding his chubby fingers to form the letter C, curve around stop. I picked up the envelope. It felt light. It felt like nothing. "Do you have a lighter?" I asked. Ms. Cheng blinked. She reached into her purse and handed me a silver Zippo. I didn't open the letter. I didn't hold it up to the light. I walked to the diner's entrance, stepped out into the drizzle, and flicked the lighter open. The flame danced in the wind. I held the corner of the envelope to the fire. It caught quickly, the cheap paper curling into black ash. I watched my name disappear. I watched Derek's desperate plea turn into smoke that was instantly washed away by the Seattle rain. "Tell him," I said, walking back to the table and handing the lighter back. "Tell him the witness is unavailable." The next hurdle was the house. My house. The Craftsman bungalow on the bluff. I had to go back one last time. Not to live, but to purge. I hired an estate liquidation company. They were efficient vultures. They promised to have the house empty in 48 hours. "Broom clean," they called it. I stood in the living room while strangers in blue coveralls packed my life into boxes. I watched a young man wrap my wife's collection of porcelain birds in bubble wrap. He was careless, tossing them into a bin. 10 years ago, I would have yelled at him. Today, I didn't care. They were just things. And things couldn't love you back. I walked into the garage. It was still exactly as Derek had staged it, boxes piled high, my life categorized for the dump. I found the plastic bin with Martha's quilt. I took it out. It smelled of mildew and the damp garage air. I held it to my face, trying to find her scent, trying to find the comfort I used to feel wrapped in it. But all I could smell was the betrayal. I folded the quilt. I didn't keep it. I placed it gently on top of a pile marked charity donation. Maybe it would keep someone else warm, someone who hadn't been frozen from the inside out. Then I saw it. Tucked behind a workbench covered in dust was a small wooden box. I opened it. Inside was a model airplane, a P-51 Mustang. Derek and I had built it together when he was 10. It had taken us a whole summer. We had painted the details with a single-haired brush. I picked it up. The glue had yellowed. The propeller was chipped. I remembered that summer. I remembered Derek looking up at me, his eyes shining with adoration. "Dad, when I grow up, I'm going to fly just like you." He didn't grow up to fly. He grew up to feed on the ground. I crushed the balsa wood model in my hand. It snapped easily dry and brittle. I let the pieces fall to the oil-stained concrete floor. I didn't sweep them up. I left them there among the dust bunnies and the dead spiders. The search for the plane began 3 weeks after the arrest. I had the money from the sale of the house liquidated for cash sold to a developer who planned to tear it down and build condos. I didn't care. Let them bulldoze the ghosts. I drove up and down the coast visiting small airfields looking for a way out. I looked at Piper's Mooney's Beechcrafts. They were all too new, too automated. Glass cockpits and autopilot systems that did the flying for you. I didn't want a computer to fly me. I wanted to feel the air. I wanted to fight the wind. I found her in a rusted hangar in Skagit County. The owner was an old mechanic named Sal, a man with grease permanently etched into the lines of his face. He chewed on an unlit cigar as he walked me to the back of the shed. "She's a wreck, Clayton," Sal grunted, kicking a tire that was low on air. "Cessna 182, 1978. Engine hasn't turned over in 5 years. Avionics are ancient. Interior smells like a wet dog. You don't want this headache." I walked around the plane. The white paint was chalky and peeling, revealing the dull aluminum skin underneath. There was a bird's nest in the cowling. The windows were yellowed with age. She looked abandoned. She looked unloved. She looked exactly like I felt. I ran my hand along the leading edge of the wing. It was dented, scarred by hail and time. But under the grime, the rivets were solid. The structure was true. I climbed into the cockpit. The leather seat cracked under my weight. The yoke was cold in my hands. I closed my eyes and inhaled. Beneath the musty smell, I caught the faint, sharp scent of aviation fuel and hydraulic fluid. It was the smell of potential. "Does the frame have corrosion?" I asked. "Clean as a whistle," Sal admitted. "Just surface rust, but the engine needs a total rebuild. Carburetor is shot. Mags are dead." "I'll take it," I said. Sal looked at me like I was crazy. "Did you hear me, oh? You'll spend more time fixing her than flying her. Why this piece of junk?" I looked through the hazy windshield at the gray sky outside. "Because she's broken, Sal," I said softly. "And I know how to fix broken things. Or at least I know how to try." I spent the next week living in that hangar. I slept on a cot next to the fuselage. I worked 18-hour days. My hands, which had been clean and shaking for months, became stained with oil and steady with purpose. I tore the engine down to the block. I polished the pistons. I rebuilt the carburetor, adjusting the mixture screws with the precision of a watchmaker. Every bolt I tightened was a form of therapy. Every wire I spliced was a connection I was repairing in my own mind. I wasn't just fixing an engine. I was rebuilding my own capacity to function. At night, under the glare of the work light, I talked to the plane. "We're going to get out of here," I whispered, tightening the torque on the propeller bolts. "We're going to leave the rot behind. Just you and me." The day before I left, Agent Russo came to the hangar. He watched me from the doorway as I wiped down the cowling with a rag. "You look different," he said. "I took a shower," I joked, though I knew what he meant. "No," Russo said, walking over. "You look dangerous again, in a good way." He handed me a folder. "Derek's plea deal is finalized. He tried to trade information on you to reduce his sentence. He told them you had hidden accounts. He told them you were the mastermind." I didn't stop wiping the plane. And we laughed at him," Russo said. "But it shows his character. He's a scorpion, Clayton. He'll sting until the moment he dies." I stopped. I looked at the reflection of my face in the polished aluminum spinner of the propeller. The eyes staring back were tired, yes, but the fog was gone. "Scorpions can't fly," I said. I threw the rag into the bin. "Is the paperwork ready?" "It is," Russo said. "You're cleared for departure." That night I sat in the cockpit in the dark. I taped the picture of Martha to the panel. It was the only thing I had saved. "Well, Marty," I whispered to the photo, "the house is gone. The boy is gone. It's just us now. Let's go see what's on the other side of the mountains." I slept in the pilot's seat that night, waiting for the dawn, waiting for the moment I could finally truly leave the earth behind. The runway at the private airfield north of Seattle was cracked and overgrown with weeds pushing through the asphalt. The windsock whipped violently in the stiff breeze coming off the Puget Sound, carrying the scent of salt water and aviation fuel. It was the smell of my youth. It was the smell of freedom. I stood on the tarmac running my hand along the riveted aluminum flank of the Cessna 182 Skylane I had purchased 3 days ago. It was an old bird built in 1978. The paint was peeling in places, and the upholstery in the cockpit smelled of old leather and coffee, but the engine was pristine. I had spent the last 48 hours rebuilding the carburetor myself, grease under my fingernails for the first time in years. It felt good. It felt honest. It had been exactly 30 days since the raid at the villa. 30 days since I watched my son being dragged away in handcuffs. The justice system usually moves at a glacial pace, but when the evidence includes high-definition video of a conspiracy to kidnap and murder a federal witness, the gavel falls fast. Derek and Tiffany took a plea deal to avoid life in prison. They got 20 years each. No parole for the first 15. By the time Derek walks out of a cell, he will be 55 years old. He will be broke alone and stamped with the felony record he tried to pin on me. I didn't go to the sentencing. I didn't write a victim impact statement. I didn't visit them. As far as I was concerned, the trial was just paperwork closing out a failed business venture. I sold everything. The villa was seized by the government as proceeds of crime, but I voluntarily listed my own house. The realtor told me I was crazy. She said the market was up. She said the Craftsman bungalow was a historic gem. I told her to sell it for land value if she had to. I couldn't sleep there anymore. I couldn't walk into the kitchen without seeing the smart lock Derek installed to keep me out. I couldn't sit in the living room without feeling the ghost of his betrayal. The memories of my wife Martha were still there, but they were covered in a film of grime that no amount of scrubbing could remove. I sold the furniture. I sold the cars. I sold the china. I donated the proceeds to the rehab center project just like I promised. I kept only 2 things: my old leather flight jacket and the picture of Martha that I now had taped to the instrument panel of the Cessna. A black SUV crunched over the gravel drive approaching the hangar. I didn't flinch. I knew who it was. The car stopped and Agent Russo stepped out. He wasn't wearing his tactical gear today. He was wearing a windbreaker and jeans. He looked tired. Saving people from their own families takes a toll on a man. He walked over to me, squinting against the sun. He looked at the small single-engine plane, and then at me. "She looks airworthy," Clayton Russo said, patting the propeller. "But just barely." "She is solid," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. "She has strong bones. That is all that matters." Russo nodded. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. "I brought you the final paperwork on the trust liquidation," he said. "The transfer to the Veterans Administration is complete. The construction on the new wing starts next month. You did a good thing, Clayton. That money is going to save a lot of lives." I took the envelope and tossed it into the open cargo door of the plane without looking at it. "It was dirty money, Agent," I said. "Now it is clean. That is all I care about." Russo kicked at a loose stone on the tarmac. He looked uncomfortable. He wasn't good at goodbyes. "You know you don't have to leave," he said. "The prosecutor wants to give you a commendation. The press wants to talk to you. You are a hero in this town. The father who took down a crime ring." I laughed. It was a dry sound lost to the wind. I am not a hero, Russo. I am a man who had to cut off his own limb to survive gangrene. That doesn't make me brave. It just makes me an amputee. I climbed up onto the wing strut and opened the pilot's side door. I slid into the left seat. The cockpit was tight and familiar. The instrument gauges stared back at me like old friends. Altimeter, airspeed, artificial horizon. They didn't lie. They didn't plot. They just told you exactly where you were. Russo stepped up to the wing. He held out his hand. "Where will you go, Clayton?" he asked. I shook his hand. His grip was firm. "South," I said. "Maybe Mexico. Maybe further. I have enough fuel to get to Oregon today. After that, who knows?" "But why run?" Russo asked. "You won. You got your house back. You got your life back." I put on my aviator sunglasses, hiding the look in my eyes. "I didn't get my life back, Agent. I just survived the crash. And I am not running. I am just changing altitude." I looked out at the gray Seattle skyline in the distance. Somewhere in that concrete jungle, my son was sitting in a 6x8 cell wearing an orange jumpsuit. I wondered if he was thinking about me. I wondered if he was thinking about the bear. "I don't have a son anymore, Russo," I said, my voice cracking slightly for the first time. "I don't have a home. But I have this plane, and I have the sky. For an old pilot, that is enough." Russo nodded slowly. He stepped down from the wing. "Clear skies, Captain," he said. I shouted "clear prop" and turned the key. The engine coughed once, then roared to life. The propeller blurred into a spinning disk of invisible power. The plane shook, vibrating with potential energy. I checked the oil pressure. Green. I checked the flaps. Set. I released the parking brake. The Cessna lurched forward. I taxied to the end of the cracked runway. I didn't look back at Russo. I didn't look back at the city. I pushed the throttle full forward. The engine screamed. The plane surged down the runway, picking up speed. 40 knots. 50 knots. The tail wheel lifted off the ground. 60 knots. I pulled back gently on the yoke. The vibration of the wheels on the asphalt ceased instantly, replaced by the smooth buoyancy of flight. The ground fell away. The weeds, the fences, the black SUV, they all shrank until they were just toys. I banked left, climbing through the cloud layer. The gray mist enveloped the cockpit for a few seconds, blinding me. It was cold and damp, but I held the course. I kept climbing, and then suddenly I broke through. Above the clouds, the sun was shining with a brilliance that hurt my eyes. The sky was an endless, pristine ocean of blue. It was quiet up here, peaceful. I leveled off at 5,000 feet. I looked at the empty seat next to me. There was no one there to lie to me. No one to drug me. No one to sell me out. I was alone. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled. A real, genuine smile. I adjusted the trim. I set the heading for south. The past was down there, buried under the clouds and the rain. But I was up here. I am Clayton Reeves. I am a pilot. And I am finally free. If you enjoyed this story of justice and survival, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us bring you more stories like this one. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to walk away from everything to find your peace? Until next time, keep your eyes on the horizon. Clayton's story stands as a brutal testament to a harsh truth. Sometimes the most dangerous enemies share our own blood. Money and greed do not change a person's nature. They simply strip away the mask. Derek traded a father's unconditional love for a bank balance only to lose his freedom. The most vital lesson here is about boundaries and self-preservation. Family should never be a shackle that binds you to abuse. When trust is irrevocably broken, the bravest act is not forgiveness, but the courage to cut the cord and fly away to find your own peace. If Clayton's journey to justice touched a nerve, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so we can keep bringing you these powerful stories. Have you ever had to make the hard choice to walk away from a toxic relationship? Share your experience in the comments below.